Story 1. The Whispers in the Woods. The summer sun lingered low on the horizon, casting golden streaks across the sprawling nature preserve that stretched nearly 1,000 acres behind my childhood home. For me, summer was more than a season. It was a state of mind, a vibrant pulse of life that thrummed through the warm air, rustling leaves and endless possibilities of adventure. At 18, I was a dreamer, tethered to the outdoors, where the scent of pine and the caress of a gentle breeze could wash away the weight of the world. My friends Chuck and Jackson were my partners in crime, each bringing their own flavor to our escapades. Chuck, with his Boy Scout obsession and an encyclopedic knowledge of knots, was the planner. Jackson, on the other hand, was the wild card, always armed with a cooler of beers and a devil-may-care grin. Together, we were invincible, or so we thought. It was mid-June, the kind of night where the air was thick with warmth and the stars seemed close enough to touch. We'd hatched a plan to camp deep in the preserve, a forbidden act that carried the thrill of rebellion. The preserve was a labyrinth of towering oaks, tangled underbrush, and hidden clearings, a place where you could lose yourself and never be found. We knew camping there was technically illegal, but the odds of getting caught in such a vast wilderness seemed laughably slim. So with Chuck's industrial-grade flashlight cutting through the darkness and Jackson's JBL speaker blasting classic rock, we trekked into the heart of the forest, our laughter echoing off the trees. After nearly an hour of hiking, we stumbled upon a small clearing, a perfect circle of flat ground surrounded by a cathedral of trees. Chuck took charge, barking orders like a seasoned drill sergeant as we pitched the tent and gathered firewood. Jackson, already 3 beers in, was swaying slightly, his grin wider than ever. By midnight, the fire was roaring, casting flickering shadows that danced across our faces. We talked about everything and nothing, girls, dreams, the future, our voices mingling with the crackle of the flames and the distant hoot of an owl. It was one of those moments you wanted to bottle up and keep forever. But forever is a fragile thing in the wilderness. It started with a sound, a whistle, sharp and piercing, slicing through the night like a blade. It was so loud it seemed to vibrate in my chest, yet it felt distant, as if it had traveled miles to reach us. I froze, my beer halfway to my lips, my heart hammering. Jackson killed the music, and the silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire. We exchanged glances, each of us searching for an explanation, but none came. The whistle wasn't an animal. It was human, deliberate, like the kind you'd hear at a baseball game, but amplified to an unnatural degree. Chuck's flashlight swept the darkness, revealing nothing but endless trees. "We should pack up," he whispered, his voice tight with unease. Jackson and I protested, our drunken bravado masking the fear creeping up our spines. Leaving meant stumbling through the dark, possibly straight into whatever or whoever had made that sound. Staying, though, felt like tempting fate. We compromised, agreeing to wait it out, the fire our only defense against the unknown. Minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The forest, once alive with the hum of crickets and rustling leaves, had gone eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Then out of nowhere, something small and bright arced through the air, landing in the fire with a hiss. A firecracker. It sparked and popped, a miniature explosion that sent embers flying. I screamed, my voice raw with panic, as Chuck bolted into the darkness, his flashlight beam swinging wildly. Jackson and I scrambled after him, abandoning our gear, our only thought to escape. We ran until our lungs burned, branches clawing at our skin, the forest a blur of shadows. When we finally stopped, gasping for air, Jackson doubled over, retching into the underbrush. Chuck turned off the flashlight and we stood there listening for pursuit. To our relief, the forest remained still. No footsteps, no whistles, just the oppressive quiet of a place that no longer felt welcoming. Dawn was still hours away, and the reality of our situation settled in. We were miles from civilization, with no gear and no clear path back. Chuck, ever the pragmatist, insisted we return to the campsite to retrieve his equipment and douse the fire, citing the risk of a forest blaze. Jackson wanted to flee and never look back, but I sided with Chuck, clinging to the faint hope that the firecracker was just a cruel prank. Guided by Chuck's uncanny sense of direction, we retraced our steps, the glow of the fire eventually coming into view. But as we crept closer, Jackson grabbed my arm, his face pale in the dim light. He pointed, and my blood turned to ice. There in our chairs sat three figures, motionless as statues. The firelight illuminated one face, a man, his mouth agape, eyes vacant, as if staring into another world. The other two were shrouded in shadow, their presence unnatural, wrong. They didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there, occupying our space like ghosts claiming a forgotten haunt. We watched, paralyzed, until Jackson's foot slipped, dislodging a rock that clattered loudly. In an instant, the fire went dark, smothered as if by an invisible hand. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush behind us, and we ran again, this time not stopping until we reached Jackson's car, parked at the edge of the preserve. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in the terror of what we'd seen. The next day, Chuck convinced me to return in daylight, arguing we couldn't leave his gear behind. Jackson refused, his eyes haunted. The campsite was eerily intact, our chairs still in place, the fire pit cold. But inside Chuck's tent, we found a dead rat, its body bloated and reeking, a grotesque message left for us. We grabbed what we could and left, vowing never to return. Years later, the preserve remains a shadow in my memory, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. I've heard rumors since, whispers of strange figures seen in the woods, of campers vanishing without a trace. Whether it was a prank gone wrong or something darker, I'll never know. But one thing is certain, the forest keeps its secrets, and I have no intention of seeking them out again. Story 2, The Watcher in the Park. The summer of my 24th year was a pressure cooker of heat and tension. Living with my parents in a cramped, run-down house on the edge of town, I felt like a caged animal, my dreams suffocated by the weight of financial strain and familial discord. My parents and I were like oil and water, our arguments a daily ritual that left me drained. Work, grueling hours on construction sites, offered little escape, but fitness was my salvation. The burn of a good workout, the rhythm of my breath, the open sky above. It was the one place I could find peace. There was a park 10 minutes from home, perched on a hill overlooking the glittering skyline of our small city. It wasn't much, just a few pull-up bars, a dip station, and a winding trail. But at night, when the crowds vanished, it became my sanctuary. The humid summer air, thick with the scent of grass and distant rain, wrapped around me like a familiar embrace. I'd drive there after dark, my beat-up Corolla rattling along the quiet streets, windows down to let the breeze chase away the day's frustrations. One sweltering night, with my parents' voices rising in yet another argument, I grabbed my keys and slipped out. The park was deserted, the parking lot a lonely expanse of cracked asphalt under the glow of a single streetlight. I parked, stepped out, and breathed in the heavy air, the city lights twinkling below like a promise of something better. The workout area was tucked into a clearing, surrounded by dense trees that whispered in the wind. I started my routine, losing myself in the repetition of pull-ups, the strain in my muscles a welcome distraction. Between sets, I paused to stretch, shaking out my arms. That's when it hit me, a prickling sensation, like eyes boring into my back. I turned and my heart stopped. A man stood barely a foot away, his gaunt face looming in the dim light. He was tall, disheveled, his clothes hanging off him like rags, his eyes glinting with an unsettling intensity. I yelped, stumbling back, my pulse racing. He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine, and apologized, claiming he hadn't meant to scare me. His voice was rough, like gravel, and his smile was too wide, too eager. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He said he lived in the park, a vague answer that only deepened my unease. He claimed he'd seen me working out here before, asked if I could teach him. I'm not confrontational by nature, and the last thing I wanted was trouble, so I mumbled something about finishing my set and leaving. I hopped back on the bar, trying to ignore the weight of his gaze. His words echoed in my mind. I see you here all the time. Had he been watching me? For how long? As I neared the end of my set, something worse happened. He muttered my name, my full name, first and last, clear as day. My blood turned to ice. I dropped from the bar, backing away, my voice trembling as I stammered. What did you say? He didn't answer, just stared, his smile stretching wider, his eyes gleaming with something unhinged. I didn't wait for an explanation. I grabbed my keys and speed-walked to my car, feeling his gaze like a physical weight. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced back. He was at the pull-up bar, mimicking my movements with eerie precision, his body jerking in a grotesque parody of my workout. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing. Had he really said my name? Was I losing it? I tried to push it aside, to chalk it up to a weird encounter, but sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning I woke early for work, stepping outside to find an unmarked envelope on the doorstep, addressed to me in sharp, angular handwriting. I pocketed it, figuring I'd open it later, and headed to the construction site. During my lunch break, I sat in my car, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket. I tore it open, expecting a bill or a flyer. Instead, I found 10 photographs, each one a punch to the gut. They were of me, driving my car, working at the site, exercising in the park. One showed my house, the faded paint and sagging porch unmistakable. The worst was a photo of me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window, my face peaceful and unaware. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I choked back a sob, tears stinging my eyes as the reality sank in. I was being watched, hunted. I left work early, ignoring my boss's protests, and drove straight to the police station. I handed over the photos, recounted the encounter in the park, described the man's gaunt face and wild eyes. The officers promised to investigate, but their tone suggested little hope. I told my parents, and for once, their usual indifference gave way to concern. We started locking the doors, checking the windows, living like prisoners in our own home. But the nightmare didn't end. A few nights later, at 3 a.m., a sharp knock on the door jolted me awake. I froze, listening as the sound came again, deliberate and insistent. I didn't dare answer. Days later, I found a sticky note on my car window, a crude heart scrawled in black Sharpie. I went back to the police, who opened a stalking investigation, but they had no leads, no evidence beyond the photos in my story. It's been a month and the fear hasn't faded. My parents are searching for a new place, but money is tight and options are few. I've stopped going to the park, trading the open air for a cramped gym, but even there, I feel eyes on me. Every creak in the house, every shadow in the corner sets my nerves on edge. I sleep with a knife under my pillow, one eye open, waiting for the next move in a game I never wanted to play. Whoever he is, he's out there, watching, and I know this isn't over. Story 3, The Rooftop Chase. Last summer at 22, I was more hermit than hero, content to spend my nights gaming or scrolling through my phone in the dim glow of my bedroom. Socializing wasn't my thing. Too much effort, too many strangers. But my friend Philip, a relentless force of chaos, had a knack for dragging me out of my shell. When he texted me about a house party at 8 p.m., I groaned but agreed, knowing he'd never let me hear the end of it if I bailed. The promise of free booze and a chance to break my routine was enough to tip the scales. Philip was in a neighboring town, so we decided to drive separately. I punched the address into my GPS and hit the road, the summer night alive with the hum of crickets and the faint glow of fireflies. But just as I pulled onto the street, my phone buzzed. Philip's name flashed on the screen, followed by a text. "Sorry man, gotta bail. Family stuff." I cursed under my breath, tempted to turn around and call it a night. But I'd driven 30 minutes, and the thought of slinking back home felt like defeat. So I parked, took a deep breath, and walked up to the house, the thump of music vibrating through the walls. The host, Randy, greeted me at the door, his grin wide and genuine. He was the kind of guy who could make anyone feel welcome, his charisma infectious without being overbearing. The house was packed, bodies swaying to the beat, red Solo cups in every hand. Randy introduced me to a few people, and to my surprise, the crowd was friendly, their laughter easing my usual awkwardness. I even caught the eye of a girl with a sly smile, her presence a flicker of possibility in the haze of the night. As the hours slipped by, I leaned into the party, the alcohol loosening my inhibitions. Shots turned to beers, and soon I was buzzing, the room spinning gently around me. But by 2 a.m., the fun tipped into excess. Nausea churned in my stomach, and the walls seemed to close in. I needed air, a moment to regroup. The bathrooms were occupied, so I stumbled upstairs, navigating a maze of hallways that seemed to twist and turn like a funhouse. At the top floor, I found a door to what looked like an attic, its air thick with dust and the faint scent of old wood. Desperate for solitude, I slipped inside. There was no light switch, but a small window in the far corner offered a sliver of moonlight. I opened it, letting the cool night breeze wash over me, soothing the nausea that threatened to overwhelm. I leaned out, my head hanging over the roof, the quiet a stark contrast to the chaos below. For a moment, I felt at peace, the world reduced to the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city. Then I heard it, footsteps, deliberate and heavy, crunching on the shingles. My heart skipped a beat. Who would be on the roof at this hour? Curiosity, fueled by alcohol, overrode my better judgment. I climbed out the window, my movements clumsy but determined, and stood on the sloping roof, the moonlight casting long shadows. That's when I saw them, two figures, masked and clad in dark clothing, emerging from another window with bags slung over their shoulders. Burglars. Panic surged through me, my mind racing. Randy's warm welcome, the laughter of the party. It all felt violated by their presence. I wanted to shout to alert the house, but a colder thought stopped me. What if they were armed? My drunken haze made me reckless, but not suicidal. I crouched, watching as they moved toward a sloping section of the roof, clearly planning their escape. Then I slipped, my foot scuffing a shingle with a loud scrape. One of the burglars whipped around, his eyes locking onto mine through the slits of his mask. Time slowed, my breath catching as he nudged his partner. They started toward me, their movements swift and purposeful. Adrenaline kicked in, drowning out the alcohol. I couldn't let them get away, not after Randy's kindness, not when I had a chance to do something. I followed, keeping low, my heart pounding as I trailed them across the roof. They reached the slope, starting their descent, when I fumbled for my phone to call 911. My hands, slick with sweat, betrayed me, and the phone slipped, clattering loudly against the shingles. "Who's there?" one of the burglars hissed, his voice sharp with menace. I ducked, my eyes darting for anything I could use. A loose shingle caught my eye. Without thinking, I grabbed it and hurled it, missing but startling them. The closer burglar lost his footing, tumbling down the roof with a cry, crashing into the gutter before hitting the ground. The second burglar, panicked, leaped to a nearby tree, scrambling down like a shadow. I rushed to the edge, peering over to see the fallen burglar groaning, clutching his leg. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops, maybe a neighbor annoyed by the party's noise. I stumbled back through the attic, down the stairs and into the chaos of the party, my heart still racing. I found Randy, his laughter fading as I blurted, "There's been a robbery. I saw them on the roof." His face went pale, and he rushed to call the police, the party's energy shifting to confusion and fear. When the cops arrived, I recounted everything, leading them to the injured burglar, who was arrested on the spot. His partner had vanished into the night. The party ended abruptly, guests scattering as the lights flicked on. Randy thanked me, his voice thick with gratitude, but I was just glad to have helped. I drove home, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion, wondering why anyone would rob a house during a party. Maybe they'd cased the place, knew the upstairs would be empty. I didn't have answers, only the lingering thrill of the chase. Months later, I was at Phillips gaming when Randy called, inviting us over. His house looked different, new reinforced windows and a heavy-duty front door, a fortress against the world. Over beers in his basement, he shared the chilling aftermath. The arrested burglar had refused to name his partner, taking a long prison sentence in silence. But the real horror was what followed. Threatening letters, photos of Randy's family, a suspicious car circling their house at night, items in their yard disturbed. His father had upgraded their security, but the fear lingered, an open wound. As summer approaches, I know I'll see Randy again, and I dread what new chapter this story might hold. For now, I'm left with the memory of that night, a reckless act that made me more than the quiet kid I thought I was. But heroism comes at a cost, and I can't shake the feeling that the shadows on that roof are still out there, watching,